We're very happy that this panel is going to be chaired by John Spinello, who is a partner with K&L Gates, and he's going to take it from here. John.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome back, everyone. As Michael said, I'm John Spinello. This panel will focus on energy law and policy issues, including development of the Marcellus Shale, energy efficiency, and green jobs in the energy sector. We are privileged to have with us three really extraordinary speakers and officials with extensive experience in these energy law and policy matters. So let's get right to it. Our first speaker is Stuart Grushkin, Executive Deputy Commissioner of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Stuart was appointed to this position in April 2007, where he serves, where he is responsible for the day-to-day operation of the department. Prior to taking this position, Stuart practiced law here in New York City, and it's my privilege to welcome him today. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. So, like some of the speakers in the first panel, I'm going to go through my slides very quickly. I realize I have 22 slides in only 15 minutes. So, all right, Marcellus Shale. I'm going to start with two preliminary points. The first is that the environmental concerns are real, and DEC is very seriously considering them. And I say that because I conducted the public hearings that we had on the supplemental GEIS, and a lot of people in the room somehow believed that we didn't think that there are real environmental issues and that we weren't taking this seriously. In fact, we're taking this very seriously, and all you have to do is look across the border at what's happened in Pennsylvania to know why we're taking it seriously. There is nothing hypothetical about the potential environmental impacts or the nature of the potential environmental harm, and that's why we're taking a very careful look at this. The other point I want to stress is that we are still in a decision-making process. We have received many, many thousands of comments on the supplemental GEIS. They're in the process of being reviewed, analyzed, peer-reviewed. We got some terrific comments from a lot of environmental groups, from industry, from municipalities, including New York City. And so my presentation today is not going to answer the question of what's going to happen. In fact, that is still being determined. So this is the drill first, think later slide, which I created really to emphasize that we are taking a different approach from other jurisdictions. We are thinking about what should happen here before deciding what to do. And I don't know how many people here are aware of the town of Dish, Texas. It used to be known as Clark, Texas, and then the Dish satellite TV company came along and said, if you agree to change your name to Dish, we'll give everybody in town a satellite TV system. So they changed their name to Dish, and this was some number of years ago. Then the gas companies came to town, and they said, we would love to put some compressor stations here, and everyone will get rich. And I suppose not surprisingly, they said, great. And what really struck me is that this past January, in an AP story, the mayor of Dish, Texas, who is now floating around New York State, giving speeches about how we should be careful not to let happen here what happened there. But he was quoted as saying, talking about air pollution from these compressors, saying, nobody even thought about that kind of stuff. And to all of us here, where you're busy dealing with environmental impact statements and very difficult permitting processes and SEQR and NEPA and so on, it seems rather inconceivable to get a big-time industrial operation coming to town without thinking about it, but that is exactly what's happened in a lot of the other places where the problems have occurred, and it's not something that's going to be happening in New York. All right, getting to the law. DEC's mission is right at the front of the ECL. It links the quality of environment to the quality of life, gives us a mandate to conserve, improve, and protect natural resources, prevent, abate, and control pollution, and enhance the health, safety, and welfare and overall economic and social well-being of New York State. We also, in Article 23 of the ECL, have another mandate, and that's to authorize and provide for the operation and development of oil and gas properties in such a manner that a greater ultimate recovery of oil and gas may be had. This is actually a very unique provision in the ECL. I think it's really the only place where there's actually a statutory policy that encourages an industry. But it says such a manner that a greater ultimate recovery of oil and gas may be had. So we have these two statutory policies. Gas drilling is not only legal in New York State, it's actually something that is encouraged by statute. Yet we also have this overriding policy and mandate to be protective of the environment. So for those of you who have not been steeped in this for the last 2 years and may not be aware of it, New York actually has a very mature and established oil and gas drilling industry. All of those, the red areas on the map, are gas wells in New York State. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. There are actually little dots that have formed big blobs. The green areas are oil wells, which kind of just sneak up over the border of Pennsylvania. We have right now, we have 13 or 14,000 active oil and gas wells. Most of them are natural gas wells. And over the course of time, we estimate that over 75,000 wells have been drilled in New York State. And one of the reasons that you may not be aware of this is because, for the most part, this kind of conventional oil and gas operation has not caused environmental problems in New York State. The regulatory authority that we have comes from the statutory provisions that I told you about before. We have regulations, Part 550 to Part 559. Seeker plays a very big part here, and in fact, what we're engaged in doing now is doing a supplement to the 1992 generic environmental impact statement that covers the permitting of oil and gas wells. We also have the authority to do guidance and special permit conditions, and there are a host of DEC jurisdictions involved in this, not just mineral resources, but also air resources, water, solid and hazardous materials, fish, wildlife, not really marine resources, and lands and forests. All right, this is an energy panel, so I wanted to put in a couple of slides about the energy implications. First, the New York State Energy Plan expressly recognizes that production and use of in-state energy resources can increase the reliability and security of our energy systems and has other advantages, and it expressly recognizes the possibility and the potential benefit from utilizing this natural gas resource in New York from the Marcellus Shale, but it does say, probably because we participated in the process of drafting the plan, that the Marcellus Shale development will require environmental safeguards that are protective of water supplies and natural resources. A couple of recent articles. The Wall Street Journal had an article earlier this month called "Shale Gas Will Rock the World," where it said shale gas may be the key to solving some of our most pressing short-term crises. Will influence energy markets and geopolitics. The New York Times had a story back in March where there was a energy industry conference. They reported on that a report that came out saying shale development is, quote, simply the most significant energy innovation so far this century. So I'm not vouching that any of that is true, but if you go online, you'll find a lot of articles that are talking about the potential impact of shale gas, not just here in New York, but really to the macro energy markets. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about with Marcellus Shale drilling, I'm going to go very quickly through it. There are actually a few stages to the process, none of which are particularly controversial by themselves, but when combined, they become controversial. There's drilling and groundwater protection. This has been around for a very long time. What you see here is the borehole that's drilled down. It will almost always be going through an aquifer and through casing requirements where you have cement that goes around the pipes. It isolates the aquifer. These are extremely well established, and the reason there haven't been problems for the most part in New York State is because the casing requirements are very good and they protect the water supplies. Next, horizontal drilling. Horizontal drilling has, in fact, started in 1929. It became common in the 1980s as technology advanced, and what they're able to do is put like a little motor and, I don't know, something else on the drill bit so it can start turning, and they know exactly where it goes so that it can get to where the resource is. Finally, hydraulic fracturing, which sounds like it's brand new because everyone's talking about it, but hydraulic fracturing started in the late 1940s. It's very common in vertical wells, the conventional wells. In fact, it's used in almost all of the gas wells that are drilled in New York State now, and in tens of thousands, if not millions, throughout the world. But what's happened is that the horizontal drilling and the hydraulic fracturing have gotten combined, and that's what's new, and that's what's causing the problems. What you see here is actually the horizontal leg of a well, and then I don't know if you can really see it, but they shoot the water that's mixed in with some sand and chemical additives, which I make sound very innocent, but they're not. It's put through the pipes at very high pressure. It comes out, fractures the brittle rock, the gas comes back in, everything comes back out, and then the gas well is operating. All right, why is this a big deal? The recoverable reserves are estimated at 490 trillion cubic feet, which is a lot. The annual U.S. consumption is 23 TCF. Annual New York consumption is 1.2 TCF. And the kind of remarkable thing is that these estimates just keep going up. That as geologists are looking, they're saying there's more and more shale gas reserves there. So there's a lot of gas down there. There's also a lot of money involved, that the drilling companies are coming into areas that are very poor areas and offering a lot of money to the landowners. And just recently, this month, people in Maine, New York, started getting checks from leases that they entered into. There have been a couple of economic studies done that have been, I will say, highly criticized, but nonetheless, they're out there, that estimate that the economic impact on the communities where this is likely to happen will be billions. Penn State did a study in August of 2009. Broome County did its own study in July. Over a 10-year period, the economic impact of drilling alone could exceed $15 billion. And anyone who's visited Binghamton lately can understand why the prospect of this kind of economic activity there would be very appealing. So this is a map of the Marcellus Shale generally. More importantly, here it is in New York State, and as you can see, it covers a very large part of the southern half of New York. And that's why that's why there's so much attention to this, because it really does impact in a lot of places across the state. Unlike a lot of other environmental controversies that are really local, a new power plant somewhere, a new sewage treatment plant, a landfill issue, this is a controversy that covers a very big part of the state. So the purpose of the supplemental draft, the supplement to the GEIS, is really to determine what's new and generic and what's new and not generic. And since this is a room full of lawyers, I might actually have a chance of people understanding what we recently did with the New York City and the Syracuse watersheds. When we're looking at supplementing the GEIS, we really are trying to figure out what issues, what new issues are common, have common activities, common impacts, and require common mitigation, and which ones are not generic. The ones that are not generic will need to get their own supplement to the GIS. And what we recently determined is that because there are only 2 places in all of New York State that have filtration avoidance determinations for unfiltered surface water supplies, and the issues that relate to maintaining those filtration avoidance determinations are unique. They're not generic issues. So we decided that as we were preparing the supplement for the GIS, we would not include those unique areas. So we didn't ban it in New York City or ban it in the Skaneateles Lake watershed, but what we said was that these areas, because of the special requirements of filtration avoidance, which have to do with sedimentation issues and turbidity issues and the nature of the surface industrial activity and how that relates to the unfiltered surface water supply, should get their own supplement and not be included in this generic supplement. And just on a percentage basis, the areas that are covered account for only about 8% of the entire area where the Marcellus Shale is. So when we looked at the potential impacts, it really amounts to large water withdrawals. There's 5 to 8 million gallons of water per well, so it could impact on stream flow, public water supply, fish and wildlife. The hydraulic fracturing process itself requires different kinds of well-site facilities, the frac fluid composition, fluid handling, storage and transportation, the reuse and the treatment, which is a very big issue, multiple wells at a single site, longer duration of impacts. There are also other issues, consumer protection and leasing, the impacts to the infrastructure, and the localities, community and social impacts, and oversight and enforcement. I'm rattling through these issues. If you go to our website, you can find our 800-plus page draft of the supplement to the GIS that talks about these things, and as Paul pointed out, we also do talk about climate change. In terms of the timeline, the comment period ended on December 31st. We held 4 public hearings on the draft supplement. That was after we did scoping hearings. We got about 3,000 comments on the scoping, 14,000 comments received on the draft supplement. The next step will be to finalize the supplement, publish it, and do a responsiveness summary. We do not know when that will be. It's going to be a function of how long it takes us to substantively address the comments, to look at the results of the further studies that we're doing, and it is in process, and we are dedicating the resources that we have to make sure that we do the right job on it. We'll have to, under seeker, do a finding statement, and then ultimately be able to issue permits. So, like I said, this has been a very compressed presentation on a very big issue, but really the reason that this is so controversial we're only responsible for kind of 1/3 of the controversy. Our responsibility is to deal with the environmental issues, but this is a place where environmental policy, environmental protection, energy policy, and local economic development all intersect, and they do it in a very dramatic way. There are real environmental dangers here. Natural gas, however, the development of natural gas is a significant part of energy planning from both a climate change perspective and a national security perspective. And then the potential economic developments for local governments are enormous. And if you drive through some of the towns where this is likely to happen, you'll really be struck by, without being disrespectful, it's sort of a Beverly Hillbillies aspect to it, that people who have been literally scratching out a living, who a few years ago couldn't sell their farmland for $50 an acre, are now being offered $5,000 an acre plus a royalty to lease it. You have towns that can't pay for their infrastructure, for the schools and so on, and they're looking at an influx of money. From DEC's perspective, we have a paramount obligation to protect the environment. We've been approaching this from the perspective that the SGIS must be objective, science-based, to meet all legal requirements, and that this is not a popularity contest. So there are people who are very intent upon blocking it and people who are very intent upon making it happen. None of that is really material to us. What's material to us is the science, the geology, the analysis, the review, and taking our regulatory, our neutral regulatory role seriously. We have a statutory obligation to deal with it that way, and this is our opportunity to do it right. So thank you. I believe my time's up.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Our next speaker is John Williams. John is the Director of Energy Analysis for NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. John leads efforts regarding the state energy plan and has overall responsibility for policy and program planning for NYSERDA. John previously served as deputy counsel there in the agency, where he was extensively involved in the development of RGGI. John's going to talk about green jobs and technology. My privilege to welcome up John. Thank you.
Do I need to, how am I going to figure this? Yeah.
Here we go. This is you? No, that's not you. I was hoping.
No.
This is not you. Thank you, Michael.
where we're, okay. You should be able to just go to next. We'll get there. We always like to provide refresher courses here.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Okay. No. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk here this morning. I'm going to just start off with identifying some of the federal and state government activities that have been emerging in the last couple of years that have really taken on and focused on this sort of green jobs and this technology development. I think that there have been, there's been a little bit of catching up that the United States is doing in terms of recognizing the benefit of clean energy activities. But we're really sort of embracing it with a lot more enthusiasm than I don't even think people that have been in the business for a very long time had ever imagined would be. What I'll then do is just go into a discussion more on some of the NYSERDA activities with respect to looking at jobs and what does it mean to have jobs and how do we advance technology in order to try to find those jobs and try to move forward in capturing some of the opportunities that we're finding are emerging as we're looking at these new clean energy economies and also that the challenges that these very broad long-term climate strategies are presenting to both New York as well as the country generally. So I put a slide here on NYSERDA. I'm not sure if folks generally have a clear understanding about who NYSERDA is. It's an agency that's tended to fly under the radar screen for a very long period of time. But just very quickly, we are a public benefit corporation. We're created by statute through the public authorities laws. Been around since '75 with some pretty specifically defined missions of looking at energy research and development, trying to find those economic development opportunities for New York. We also did assume the statewide energy planning responsibilities a few years back. In addition to those specifically statutory identified opportunities, NYSERDA was also named by the New York State Public Service Commission to run several of the larger energy efficiency and renewable energy programs in the state, those being the System Benefits Charge, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, and recently the Commission identified NYSERDA as well as the other electric and natural gas utilities in the state to help implement the Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard. I just throw in here our corporate mission is to advance innovative energy solutions in ways that improve New York's economy and environment. And for the NYSERDA mission, it's very important that we work at this nexus between energy, environment, and economy to try to make sure that we are capturing state-based opportunities as we are making investments that are coming from public resources. Just moving on quickly to federal policies, I think these are all activities that have been going on in the last couple of years that you're probably all very familiar with. From an energy perspective, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or ARA, the stimulus program, did identify $30 billion worth of energy efficiency spending, which is a considerable amount of money considering the federal government has really taken very much a backseat to energy efficiency program implementation over the past decade plus. ARA is providing a very unique perspective on that efficiency activity. Generally, the driving metric behind these types of programs tends to look at energy reductions. It might look at environmental benefits. ARA specifically is requiring us to look for the job opportunities that can come from those clean energy activities as we're implementing the programs. Has had a very unique challenge in terms of designing programs that we can pursue to make sure that we're meeting those metrics requirements. In addition, the Homestar program, the Waxman-Markey bill, has looked at our research and development activities as well as more deployment-based energy efficiency and renewable energy opportunities. Again, all with the rubric of jobs as a driver and the movement towards this clean energy economy in terms of how we are making those investments. Homestar and the Kerry Lieberman bill I'm also putting on as examples of energy-based activities, very big focuses on the clean energy sector. Also, again, very big focus on job opportunities to come as a result of that. The next slide here is really taking a walk away from sort of jobs, looking more at the technology-based opportunities. And so what we've got here is new federal policies that are designed to try to jump into that energy research and development space. The new Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, comes right out of the energy R&D world, and he's very much integrating the approaches that were used in his former positions to get a new focus in the DOE on how technology really does need to be developed. I'll say, you know, maybe the first two should probably have been flipped if we're looking at the continuum of that development, but I'll just take them in order. The Energy Innovation Hub, that really is an opportunity to try to look at how do we develop the market, ensure that businesses have support, that as they're developing new technology opportunities, that they're able to get those opportunities into the marketplace. That has traditionally been a very underfunded activity. It's one that NYSERDA has been focusing on for a number of years, but it does tend to be the place where technology, great ideas come to be born, and then just go find a place to die. So Chu has really decided to try to turn some of that around and make sure that these developments can move more towards creating commercial opportunities for these technologies over time. The Energy Frontier Research Centers, these are more traditional basic research activities. Chu has taken a very sector-specific approach to these and has recently awarded a number of grants throughout the country to focus on specific energy-based basic energy research. New York actually was very fortunate. We won 5 of these research centers. That was, I believe, more than any other state in the country. California may have tied us with that. But it does demonstrate that New York really will be playing a very strong role in energy technology development over time. And then the last element of this is the new ARPA-E projects. We're waiting for that program to really roll out. But again, what this is trying to do is take that basic research, move from that transition phase to early demonstration, and really identify what those good potential commercialization opportunities are. Again, providing the support as we see technologies move through the economy, or move into the economy, I should say. In New York, I think I'm just going to only very briefly run through this. I provide this just for people to understand how New York has been making the investments coming into the state from ARA dollars. Again, the driving metric behind each and every one of these programs is the jobs metric. So if we can have a significantly large $123 million energy efficiency deployment program, NYSERDA has decided to focus those monies on the municipal sector, so providing monies to municipal buildings, hospitals, schools, basic energy efficiency type of retrofit activities, as well as a number of other code enforcement type activities. But again, I also throw right at the bottom, this is one of the ARA projects I'm responsible for. It was a $2 million grant. It's a grant that's actually designed mostly to create energy emergency planning, looking at the fuel flows going on in the state, and to try to make sure that there are adequate contingencies put into place if New York does, if we ever do see disruptions in that fuel flow or the energy delivery systems, and how New York can come up with adequate responses to make sure that the marketplace has adequate fuels as we move through the economy. Even on $2 million, if I don't show adequate job growth out of that, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but that is certainly going to be a driver in ensuring that, that we've successfully implemented those federal funds as part of this program. And some of these New York State policies have actually been identified before, so I won't really go into them very much. but all, again, have tried to utilize a jobs platform as part of the overall mission for these programs as we advance them. So even in our climate action plan, the governor, in issuing his Executive Order 24, certainly was commenting on the environmental imperatives that are associated with needing to take steps towards climate, but did state that these steps must come in consideration, as well as making sure that we're providing New York with strategic economic opportunities as we move through this planning process. So very much a part of the equation in looking at what our climate options are is what are the New York opportunities as we pursue those strategies. I'll say the same was coming through with our state energy plan. One of the key strategies in that plan, it's relatively innovative in the way some states have been approaching energy plans, is to adopt energy technology innovation as an integral energy strategy to meet our overall objectives in the state as we're looking at our energy requirements. They tend to, energy plans tend to really look more at fuel availability, supply needs, demand requirements. But I think we're taking it one step further, recognizing what the climate drivers are telling us we need to do, as well as what the economic opportunities that will be available as well. I'll just drop down to RGGI. I'll put RGGI up there because part of the activities in looking at the allowance sales was the proceeds coming from those allowance sales are coming into NYSERDA. The requirements in the regulations spell out that we need to put together an operating plan for how we're going to be spending those proceeds. And it was a relatively public process, I'll say. We do have an advisory group of stakeholders that has helped to inform us. And what NYSERDA planned to do, and the advisory group, I think, very much was willing to go along with what that structure was, is that we are looking to spend a certain percentage of the dollars, I will say a large percentage, about 70% of the dollars, on near-term, cost-effective deployment activities, energy efficiency and renewable energy specifically. Again, also part as a jobs opportunity creator with those funds. But on the technology side, we also did want to make sure that we weren't highly focused on just trying to identify near-term opportunities. We are taking a longer-term approach with how we're going to be investing these funds, and as a result of that, we are spending about 30% of those funds on New York State-based energy research and development opportunities. Loan financing programs, I won't spend a lot of time here, getting a lot of attention these days, again, as means to try to expand the market, provide new opportunities for consumers to tap into energy efficiency opportunities. One of the things we've got here is a new grant that came in maybe a couple of weeks ago for a $40 million grant coming in from the federal government. To do an energy efficiency retrofit sort of ramp-up program. Again, this is trying to find the right opportunities for these new financing structures to work their way into the marketplace. NYSERDA is working closely with Jim Gallagher in New York City, as well as a number of other municipalities in Westchester County, to try to create those opportunities and see if this new financing mechanism actually can get up off the ground and see if these things can really take off. All right, that was a long time talking about programs that I promised not to. So I guess when I was asked to, make this presentation on green jobs, I thought, oh boy, green jobs, that is the buzzword these days. But frankly, even I have a hard time understanding what the heck are green jobs. So I actually was thinking about, I think we can come up with three different types of categories, and this is really what I was trying to express to the audience today, that if we could get you to think about these things, then maybe in this particular way, then I'll consider this some degree of success. And I've labeled them as green jobs. These are pretty generic, and I'll get to that in a minute. What we call green collar jobs, which I think a lot of people interpret as the green jobs, but hopefully I can draw a distinction for you there. And then these green technology jobs. Again, a very separate track of economic opportunity that we should not forget about, but does tend to get lost in some of the debate. The other thing I'm just going to throw out here is that when you hear the term jobs, that can mean very different things. And a lot of these programs are making these promises, we're going to have thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs. I've seen millions of jobs result from these clean energy opportunities. those measurements can come from very different types of analytic equations to get there. On the tens of thousands types of jobs, we're really talking about jobs. And a job is any form of employment, full or part-time. It's really identifying the capacity of these investments to be able to create that employment. On a job year, we're sort of taking a more time-sensitive approach to that, and we're looking at the ability of the demand of the marketplace to create economic opportunity, and that can translate into any number of types of jobs, but it's the persistence of those jobs over time is what becomes that important measurement. Those numbers tend to always look very high because they do span over a very long period of time. But they may not necessarily all translate exactly into what this one-time job is. It's really a measurement of the amount of work that could come from any one particular employee as a result of this investment that's being made. So a job year can be one full-time job, two part-time jobs, combinations of any of the three. But I think very clearly, I think what's needed to remember is that a job is not always a job, and a job year is not always necessarily a job either. But I'll maybe provide a little bit of clarification or something as we move through this. So green jobs. So what I've put up here is a chart. We've just published our results on our SBC portfolio of programs for 2009. Our SBC portfolio is a portfolio that looks at, it has R&D efforts, energy efficiency efforts, and maybe a little bit of renewable market development. And what we will do is we take sort of a macroeconomic or an econometric view of this, and we throw those investments into our little computers, and that are all sort of set up for what the New York economy looks like, and it spits out these job numbers. What actually this is demonstrating along the zero axis, anything above is a job increase in the state of New York. But as a result of these investments, because we are using public funds, anything below the zero axis is going to be a job loss that is resultant because we are sort of taking money away from the economy generally and putting it into other purposes. So we do conduct this net analysis on an annual basis to make sure that we're providing an accurate picture of what the job impacts are in New York as a result of these investments. And that net analysis is shown by the line that moves through that blue bar. So we do see considerable net gain from the investment of our SBC funds. And what we've seen from the cumulative program from inception all the way through 2009, on a jobs platform, we've got approximately 5,300 jobs that have been created as a result of these investments. If we want to translate that into job years, from the investments and from the measures that will have continuous benefit over the life of those particular measures, we can see that we've got 28,300 job years through 2009, but from investments made from 2009, there'll be benefits that translate all the way out to 2023, and that will be over 87,000 job years. Because what happens with efficiency investments is that we see a persistence of the benefits in the form of reduced energy costs that allows those consumers to recirculate that money back into the economy, and as a result, we have a net economic benefit. We do see some reductions, perhaps in certain sectors as a result of those investments, but we do see that those are made up in economic opportunity in other newer, more emerging parts of the economy, maybe even some traditional parts of the economy. So when we do look at what those jobs constitute, however, we're not talking merely just about energy efficiency installation jobs or renewable energy construction jobs. We see jobs created through the entire spectrum of the economy. And we'll even see a few lawyer jobs in here, which I think is always a good thing. And from my perspective, there's a lot of good state and local government in there, too. So that really does help out. But really, this is what we talk about with these green jobs. These are the jobs that result from our investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy. So again, we are not talking about just these green-collar jobs. Moving along. The green-collar jobs are specifically jobs that are targeted for implementation or creating markets to further expand the clean energy economy, or what the clean energy sectors might be, whether it's efficiency, renewables, some traditional energy applications that do have some environmental profile benefits. And based on the funding that we've had, NYSERDA has been able to create different program opportunities to ensure that we can provide all of the necessary stages in terms of employment training to be able to provide those job opportunities. So with our SBC, there's been a lot of focus on curriculum development, certifications, company accreditations, all those, so those people can provide, you know, a higher level of service when we're working in buildings or working in homes to make sure that there is a level of quality, that we don't have to be concerned that we're just throwing this money at unqualified, unskilled labor. With the energy efficiency portfolio standard and renewable portfolio standard, those are going to be different than the econometric readings that we see from our SBC. These will actually be reported direct jobs as a result of the training or the implementation of the program. In EAPS, it's a much expanded program over SBC, and we're looking at over 6,200 jobs as a result of those. This is, I'm just running through some of this. These are all workforce training opportunities. This is across state agencies. I think everybody is stepping up to the plate to make sure that we are providing job opportunities and helping to move out of the current economy and to provide some sustained transformation in markets to have these market sectors act as more self-sustaining opportunities. Quickly, this energy efficiency continuum, I'm just going to say this is how technology traditionally develops, whether it's energy or any other particular economic sector. What NYSERDA does try to provide is support through each of these phases of the continuum to ensure that as technology is developing, it's providing economic opportunity as well as alleviating some of the risk for promising technologies to be able to be introduced into a more commercialized phase of their life. And this valley and mountain of death is really what NYSERDA is getting at when we're looking at technology development. What generally tends to happen, technologies can find support through basic research, but then they do fall into a chasm when they are looking for economic development. That's when NYSERDA can come into play and make sure that we're providing opportunities to get that demonstration done. As those success stories move through, however, they tend to get inundated with potential opportunities. They might be making a little bit of money, but business development has never been in the plan of scientists and these technology researchers. So we do make sure that we are providing certain partnerships, making sure we're providing outlets for their technology development so we can recognize the benefits of that. I will not walk through this, but the good news is that we have done some studies to look at what the capacities in New York State are, and we are focusing those technology developments based on what those capacities are, whether they're university-based, whether they're private finance-based. And there is a movement within New York right now to make sure that we are pulling all of these resources together so that as New York, or as the nation is actually moving to this clean energy economy, New York can very much be a leader in the development of those technologies and services. And important enough for NYSERDA to put it on the cover of our annual report last year that jobs really is the driving factor for a lot of our activities and is really the key opportunity that can be derived from a lot of these clean energy, a lot of the focus on the new clean energy economy.
Well,
thanks. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much, John. That was great. Our next speaker is Jim Gallagher. Jim is the Vice President for Energy Policy for the New York City Economic Development Corporation, where he leads energy policy for the department. And Jim is going to talk about energy efficiency in the city of New York, and lots going on. He's going to tell us about it. Thanks very much. Jim?
Thank you very much, John, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Columbia, for hosting this event. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I spend some time talking about the things we're doing in New York and some of the accomplishments, I always like to talk about the challenges that we face that are really different than any other city in the United States. I mean, New York City has so many significant energy challenges. Our energy bills alone are our utility bills over $15 billion a year. We have the highest electric rates in the country. We used to be second compared to Honolulu, but we passed Honolulu. We're finally number one. We have an aging energy infrastructure. We have 90,000 miles of electric conduit underground. We have over 1,500 manhole explosions a year. In fact, if Thomas Edison came back today, he'd think he was away just for a weekend because he'd recognize the system that he installed so long ago. We have a steam system that serves our 1,800 largest buildings, and that steam system was installed in 1878. Those buildings include Radio City, Empire State Building, just about any of the memorable buildings of New York City, completely dependent on that system. We have communities in New York City that disproportionately share the burden of energy use in the city. Astoria, Queens, for example, over 6,000, close to 7,000 megawatts of the electric generation capacity out of the 10,000 that is located in New York City is located in Astoria. Then we have small local communities that are bearing the impact. Brooklyn, for example, besides having problems historically with water quality, with the Gowanus, there are generation stations within Brooklyn, but one isolated example of the type of emerging energy problem we deal with, we have a Brooklyn cruise terminal now where the Queen Mary, as you may know, comes in about 38, 40 times a year. And when it's in port, it's burning number 6 fuel oil, just about the dirtiest stuff that there is, to run its generator, about a 20 megawatt generator. So that community is bearing the brunt of the emissions from that ship. Lastly, New York City, and this was a surprise to me, and I had somebody go back and check the figures, but I mean, New York City itself has over 600 miles of shoreline. And you don't realize that until you step back and you see an aerial photo of the city. The problem is that almost all of our important infrastructure, transportation, power, it's located along the water. And New York City is also rated number 3 by the American Insurance Confederation in terms of risk of hurricane damage, right behind Miami and New Orleans. So there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of important concerns for New York City that, unlike many other cities. But at the same time, we do have some things going for us. We have the lowest per capita carbon emissions and actually the lowest emissions of any American city. The reason for that is primarily we have a very efficient mass transit system. We have a lot of people using the mass transit system. A second important reason is we have very, referred to as efficient living spaces, translated tiny apartments, which we all can relate to. But we also have a population within New York City that cares a lot about climate change and thinks it's important. A recent survey found that close to 80% of New York City residents felt that climate change was a very serious concern. I think that compares to about 3% west of the Hudson. I may not have that number right, but it's but it's somewhat in that category. But we also, New York City is going to be growing. A lot of people want to come to New York City. We expect that by 2030, over 1 million more people will be living in the city. And adding that many more people is just going to increase the burden on our infrastructure. And that's really one of the primary reasons that back in 2007, the mayor released our sustainability plan. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. I won't go through details of it. But it's a Plan YC, which is a sustainability roadmap that addresses a number of areas: housing, land, water quality, transportation, air quality. The 2 areas in particular that I want to focus on here are the energy aspects of Plan YC and also the cutting our global warming emissions by 30%. The goal of the plan is to cut those emissions citywide, and these were mentioned earlier, citywide by the year 2030, and within the city buildings of New York City by 2017. And that's not just 30% from projected emissions, it's 30% from emissions in 2005, so it's a very aggressive target. The city government component of this is large. The city has over 4,500 buildings. We have about 1,000 megawatt load in our government, over $1 billion energy bill just for city buildings alone. So there is a massive effort to try to achieve those targets. One thing the mayor has done, which has helped us a lot, is he's instructed that up to 10% of our energy budget, that $1 billion per year, be dedicated to making investments in energy efficiency and cogeneration within our city government buildings, and those programs are now underway. John, could you pass me a cup of water? In terms of the projected greenhouse gas reductions, you can see the primary areas that we're focusing on are efficient buildings, clean power, and also sustainable transportation. Today I want to spend most of my time talking about the efficient buildings piece, which is the largest component of our plan to try to achieve that 30% reduction. Again, the buildings in New York City account for about 80% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. This slide here, you can see New York's built area is primarily concentrated in our largest buildings. As noted on the slide, only 2% of our buildings are over 50,000 square feet, but those same buildings account for 45% of the total floor space and 45% of the total energy consumption. Naturally, a majority of those buildings are located within New York City. One that always struck me as an astounding statistic is you can take that down even smaller, and there are about 400 customers of Con Edison that represent over 20% of their electric use, and those 400 customers are primarily within Manhattan. So while we have these challenges, 22,000 buildings that we need to target, over 900,000 buildings in the city, we also have opportunities such as these 400 buildings that we can immediately go after and start trying to get some accomplishments in terms of reductions. I'm going to quickly go over some of the energy initiatives and some of the accomplishments and achievements over the past year. First, on the demand side, many of you may be familiar, and I'll touch on this with a slide later, but City Council has approved and the mayor has signed what I refer to as the greener, greater buildings laws. 4 important, very important pieces of legislation, most aggressive legislation targeted at buildings and energy efficiency anywhere in the country, requiring audits, requiring actual improvements to the buildings if opportunities are identified. Very substantial program to spur retrofits in our existing building stock. We're also, I mentioned our municipal emissions reduction program, the 30% by 2017. We're doing audits and retrofits of all of our buildings right now. We're also benchmarking all of the city government buildings this year, so we hope to finish that. And what the benchmarking will be is an actual NPG-type rating that you can compare one building to another. There's going to be a requirement, this is in the law, citywide, all buildings over 50,000 square feet will need to be benchmarked in New York City. We are, I mentioned advanced data systems, but we were fortunate to win a stimulus grant that we are using to take our city government buildings, many of our largest city government buildings, and incorporate smart grid technologies in these buildings, with our hope being that we can use this great resource of city government buildings and actually bid demand reductions into New York's market and compete directly with generators. And this is not just a public sector effort, but it's a private sector effort. In fact, Columbia is one of the organizations that will be working with us and with Con Edison in launching this program. We're testing new technologies, both solar thermal pilots, urban wind demonstration. We, as John has mentioned, we were awarded some financing through stimulus that we are now in the process of setting up a financial entity that by the end of this year will have the $31 million that we received in the city that we can use as loan guarantees, hopefully leveraging significantly more money. We have challenges where hospitals and universities are matching our 30% by 2017 target, including Columbia. On the supply side, and this is where the majority of the carbon reductions so far have been achieved, we're spending a significant portion of our capital and time looking at repowering natural gas and steam facilities and power plants within the city. We're in the process right now of building a new plant, Astoria too, in Astoria unfortunately, but it's the most efficient plant in the city, and it'll be replacing dirtier generation and reducing the city's carbon emissions by close to 3%. We're also pursuing distributed generation. This is clean packaged distributed generation, which is a perfect fit for office buildings and hotels. And just in the last 2 years, over 65 megawatts of distributed generation has been placed in our buildings. We're working with Con Edison and New York Power Authority and LIPA on an offshore wind farm. And we hope later this year, probably in September, to be issuing an RFP that will solicit bids from developers for a 700 megawatt offshore wind facility, providing power into the region that would be shared by New York City customers as well as Long Island customers. And we're also involved with Con Ed in modernizing the grid. The one important point, and then I'm going to move very quickly through the few remaining slides I have, but one important point is the last bullet on this slide. We really feel the need to address what I'm going to call the above-market costs of beneficial energy projects. And by that I mean we have so many worthwhile projects within New York City. And by worthwhile, I mean, and an example would be repowering a power plant. We have many power plants right now that burn number 6 oil. Again, it's like asphalt. If you consider the true long-term cost of carbon, and we are using, within my office, we use $30 as the estimated allowance cost when we do our long-term analysis. These projects are incredibly cost-effective. There's one power plant in particular in Brooklyn that, if it was converted to cogeneration, would save close to 1 million tons of carbon per year. The problem is, in New York City right now, because of the economy being down and because we have sufficient capacity, it's not economic using traditional cost-benefit approaches to modernize that plant, to make the investment. So the problem we have is there are significant above-market costs that need to be paid for. And the question is, will government entities, will the Public Service Commission, for example, pass those costs on to the community, and is the community willing to pay those extra costs to modernize these facilities? I mentioned this, I'm not going to spend any time talking about it other than to say that you can go to the city's webpage and find out more information about all of these projects, Greener, Greater Buildings Plan, nyc.gov. Creates jobs, saves money, stimulates the economy. We also, I don't expect anyone to be able to read this, but I'm just trying to show you that we are trying to maintain a very high level of accountability. So we will every year do an inventory and documentation of what happened with carbon within the city, what spurred the increases and what was responsible for the decreases. And we also have a report card on all of our projects to see what's working and what's not working. That's one of the mayor's primary initiatives, was tracking what we're doing. I think, just to conclude, I want to make two comments, and two primary comments is we've been spending a lot of time focusing on planning and developing long-term perspectives on what needs to be done. we're really at the point right now in New York City and New York State where we have to focus on the implementation. The programs, the frameworks are set up. We need to get these programs rolling out on the street. We need to move from pilot stage to full-scale market transformation. And we need to do something else. I mean, New York State traditionally has been great at setting very aggressive targets, but we really stink at achieving those targets. And I'm going back 20, 30 years, and it's really time for us to focus on getting the job done at the state level, at the city level, making sure programs are aggressively implemented, because there's no looking back at this point. And hopefully these long-term goals will be achieved and we won't be faced with those lost expectations again. So with that, let me conclude and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim. Michael, I know we're bumping up against the next panel. Do we have time for a couple of questions? Two or three questions. Anybody for our panel?
I'm aware that, speaking of demonstration projects, the question I think can be maybe addressed by any of the panelists, but right here in the East River for a number of years, on the other side of Roosevelt Island, there's a project that's been ongoing that I think is being quite successful. I'm under the impression that under the East River there are turbines that are being turned by the inflow and outflow of the East River as the tide comes in and out every day, reliable energy all day long, every single day, doesn't depend on wind. It's underwater, and I'm under the impression that carbon-free energy has been supplied to Agristides on Roosevelt Island and that it's been successful. And I'm just wondering why, I'm wondering if this is true, number one, and what's happening with this project, if you're aware of it, and this technology in general, because it sounds like it's a pretty good idea.
Just a quick response. Yes, we're very familiar with that project. In fact, the City Economic Development Corporation has been providing funding, and I believe NYSERDA as well has been providing substantial funding. The first units that were put in the river didn't survive very well, and there was a need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new technology, primarily a new propeller technology. They are in the process of expanding that project, I believe taking it up to a megawatt. They received some funding from the federal government. They are now looking for matching funding. But I think it all comes down to the same problem all of the new technologies have. They're not economic on the surface. They're not going to, on their own, be chosen in a competitive market. And they're going to need some form of subsidy. And just like photovoltaics, turbines in the river are the same problem.
Anybody else?
With respect to the Marcellus shale exploitation, I understand from casual reading that the gas companies are not willing to disclose the contents of their fracking fluids, and it strikes me as amazing that in a regulatory environment, a company that's introducing chemicals of that sort into the environment can refuse to disclose. Is there a jurisdiction to require that disclosure?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do require it, and they are disclosed in New York. And I think one of the reasons that the Marcellus Shale Initiative has been so controversial is that there's a lot of information out there that, based on casual reading, may seem true, but once you start digging down, or drilling down, so to speak, sorry, it really isn't. So I think for people who might be interested in this, it's well worth the time to really take a look and do some critical reading and some critical thinking about it. Look at what's happened in other states. In other states, yes, in fact, gas companies have not disclosed it. In New York, we require it, and in fact, the SGIS, the draft that's out there, contains a list of over 200 some odd chemicals that are used in the process.
One more?
Yes. Well, I am a Western Catskills hillbilly with the Beverly Hills aspirations. And My question is, does Chesapeake's declining to drill in the New York City watershed reflect adversely on the health effects and the toxicity of hydrofracking? And if so, why does not the peril of the activity to millions of citizens militate in favor of banning watershed hydrofracking altogether?
Well, Chesapeake, what the gentleman is referring to is that Chesapeake, one of the larger companies, made a commitment that it would not drill on any of the lease positions that it had within the New York City watershed. And at the time it made that announcement, it tried very hard to make it clear that this was a business decision that was being made based upon the nature of the investment that it would have to make, and frankly, recognition of the kinds of hurdles that it would have to go through in order to drill within the city watershed. We don't have information that justifies banning the process. We do feel, however, that there are unique issues that apply to unfiltered surface water supply systems that have a filtration avoidance determination, which is the New York City and the Syracuse systems, and that as a result, if say Chesapeake changed its mind or another operator wanted to come in and drill there, they would have to do a supplement that would address all of the issues that might go to whether there are unique environmental risks of drilling in an unfiltered surface water supply.
Thanks, Commissioner. I'd like to thank the panel for being with us today and sharing their expertise. I appreciate it very much, and thank you all.